Snow White, a movie that represents a lot in cinematic history. Not only was it one of the first Walt Disney movies, but it was also the first animated movie ever. It was also the first movie to make its soundtrack commercially available to the public. So how did Walt Disney accomplish this amazing feat in cinema history? Well, let's take a look. If you ever wondered where Disney's classic princess story ever came from that they used in many other movies, this is where it all began. The movie starts out with the evil queen looking into the magic mirror and asking who is the fairest one of all. The mirror tells her that there is someone more beautiful than she is, and that is her stepdaughter, Snow White. The queen doesn't take the news well and she wants to have Snow White killed. Snow White gets away and she decides to hide out in a house that at the time looks abandoned. In truth though, it is actually occupied by a group of 7 dwarves. They're at first confused to see Snow White in their house. Luckily though, they decide to take her in. They sing, they dance, they have some fun, and Snow White acts like a mother figure to the dwarves. Meanwhile, the evil queen makes plans to kill Snow White using a poison apple. She does succeed, but fortunately, true love's kiss from the prince resurrects her. And then, of course, they ride into the sunset and live happily ever after. The story in this movie is pretty good, but it's not great. The characters are good and are all likable, and the villain is very fantastic in this movie. However, the prince is hardly in the movie at all in this movie, and yet he's the one who basically saves the day in the end. I do think this is a problem. However though, upon doing deeper research in this movie, I discovered why it turned out that way, and I'll get to that later. As for the plot, it is pretty standard, even by that time period standards. It's basically another run-of-the-mill damsel in distress story. The musical numbers and comedy in this movie are both good, but they're ultimately filler that doesn't help move the plot forward. While the story may not be fantastic in this movie, the animation on the other hand is what has made this movie legendary. Like I said before, this was the first full-length animated movie in history and has never been done before. Taking that in consideration and how the animation looks, they did a fantastic job with this movie. The animation looks smooth, all the character designs look great, and considering that they had nothing to go off of really before this, it took a ton of work to work on this movie. If you watch a lot of the older Silly Symphony cartoons, you'll notice that a lot of the characters are rounded and they don't have too many points to them, for the most part. Even the human characters in those shorts were often rounded and didn't have a lot of points to them. But in this movie, they wanted to make the human characters look human, which meant making them look slimmer, adding a lot more points, which back then, considering they didn't have the catalogs we do today, was a lot of work. This ties into why the prince isn't in the movie all that much. Disney actually originally planned for him to be a much more major character in the movie. They even had more storyboards and sketches drawn out like this one, where the queen would capture the prince and then the dwarves would bust him out, and then he would go and kiss Snow White. However, because it took so much time and so much work just to animate Snow White and the evil queen, they ultimately decided to lower his role and not have him in the movie as much. I personally don't know if I agree with the decision given how it affects the story, but I do understand the logic behind it and why they would do it. As for the dwarves, Disney stuck to the animation they were used to at that time. They're more rounded, they don't have a lot of points, which is probably the reason you see a lot more faster movement with them because they were so much easier to animate. The animation in this movie is legendary and has left a huge impact ever since. However, there is also a lot to be said about the movie's score. Along with the animation, music was also a huge part of the making of this movie. Not only did Walt Disney want to make music that was good for the movie, but he also wanted to make music that could be released and sold commercially. To help with this, Walt Disney got 3 composers to help him make the music for this movie. Frank Churchill, Leigh Harline, and Paul Smith. These guys did a great job with all the background music, and they also did a fantastic job with the musical numbers. Some of these songs include Whistle While You Work, Someday My Prince Will Come, and my personal favorite, The background music and all the musical numbers in this movie are pretty good, and while they don't necessarily help move the plot forward, they work very well in the scenes that they're sung in. This is because instead of the music working around the animation worked around the music. In fact, before they even started drawing for this movie, they actually recorded the music first. Some people are not a big fan of Snow White's voice, and I can understand why. Her voice is high and at times can sound irritating, but overall I think they did a good job of making the music work with her voice. This is one soundtrack I highly recommend you get in its entirety. While this movie may have problems with its story, the animation and the soundtrack in this movie more than make up for that. When you consider that they had no archives and basically no catalogs to go to and turn to for help on this movie, it truly was a lot of their own imagination. Which is why this movie has not only stood the test of time, but has been an inspiration for other filmmakers going forward. It is truly a testament to the art of animation and filmmaking, and I highly recommend that you check this out no matter what age demographic you are. From the animation to the imagery to the great music, I recommend this as a movie you get on Blu-ray. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe if you would like to see more. Also, don't forget to click the bell to get notifications on new content. And if you would like to become a patron and support the channel, you can follow me on Patreon. Link to that will be in the description below. Again, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Have a nice day.